Hello students, welcome to the class on reading comprehension by MockBank. In this class I would be taking an example of an RC. I would be reading through the RC, be highlighting the important parts for you, and then we would do a couple of questions on the basis of that RC. So during the class we will learn how to approach an RC, what all areas to look out for, and how to answer the questions. So this is an RC, looks like a pretty long RC. I will not deny it, but if you actually scan the RC, by scanning I mean reading a couple of words across different paragraphs, or probably reading just the first paragraph. So I will go through the paragraph once for you. It says, as we enter the new millennium, the challenge for humankind is to transform the existing economy into one that does not threaten or destroy the environment. That means this word is important, and I'm saying that the challenge for humankind is to transform the existing economy into one that does not threaten or destroy the environment. So I can make it out that author is actually on the side of preserving the environment. That is, it means he is being positive about the environment. This environmental revolution can be compared to the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution of the past. In other words, when the author is comparing the environmental revolution to the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, that means author is saying that environmental revolution is as important as agricultural revolution and industrial revolution that were taking place in the past. Archaeological findings reveal that the great civilizations at the dawn of history pursued economies that were fairly destructive to the environment. However, the people then were unable to change what they were doing because they did not understand what was happening. Either that, or they could not persuade their governments to bring about the necessary changes. Let's spend some time on this paragraph. It says that archaeological findings, that means things that took place in the past. So it says that these civilizations who actually have been great were fairly destructive to the environment. That means they did not care about the environment, and people were unable to change because there were two reasons that are cited in the RC. The first is they did not understand what was happening in here, or they could not persuade their governments to bring about the necessary changes. So if you could see during the first and the second paragraph, what I have been doing is I have been highlighting or keeping in mind the important parts in the RC. Today, however, we have the power to bring about changes to stop the destruction of the environment because we are becoming more aware of how our lives are shaped by the environment. So the author, from moving this particular paragraph to this particular paragraph, has changed its stand. He is saying that people in the past were not unable to change, but now they have the power to bring about the changes. Even when events do not directly affect us, reports in the mass media expose us to the extensive damage caused by such events. The such is referring to events that are destroying the environment. Fishery collapses, water shortages, rainbows burning uncontrollably, sudden death of birds, dolphin and fish record heat waves, and raging storms that cause widespread destruction only serve to increase our awareness that our survival depends on the weather, which in turn depends on our ability to maintain the ecological balance. So these particular words are the examples: fishery, water, rainforest, sudden death of birds, and other things are the examples that are causing widespread destructions. So what are they doing is they're first of all increasing our awareness that our survival depends on the weather, which in turn depends on our ability to maintain the ecological balance. Decades before, it was mainly environmental activists who played a dominant role in drawing attention to the gradual destruction of the environment. This is important. So the author has brought out two contrasts. The first contrast is between the peoples of yesterday and today. People of yesterday either did not know about things or they could not persuade their governments. The people of today actually have the power to bring about changes, and how they are doing is because of the mass media part, which is clearly written over here. Decades before, only the environmental activists were the one who were playing a dominant role in drawing attention to the gradual destruction of the environment. Today, what is happening is directors of large corporations, government ministers, prominent scientists and intelligence agencies are speaking out on the need to change. So again, there's a contrast that is coming. They have a clear sense of what has to be done, for they know that the current economy cannot take us as far as we want to go under the present circumstances. That means there is an utmost and urgent need to sustain and save our environment. Alright, so that's very clearly the intent of the author that is coming out, and it is again reaffirming the fact that the author is highly positive about regarding the environmental revolution. People can now make decisions that will help restructure economies. For example, companies who want to buy timber products can decide whether to buy from companies that are managing forest in a responsible manner or from companies suspected of illegal logging practices. So author would rather prefer to buy from companies that are managing forest in a responsible manner. Why? Because they are actually caring about environment. I can infer over here, this could be one of the questions. When it says consumers in the United States, for example, can choose to buy power from green sources as consumers become more aware of different energy sources available. Governments can also decide. This is important, right? So he's saying over here companies can decide, and then he's saying even the governments can also decide to become a green consumer by opting for sources of electricity that are climate friendly and buy paper that has a high recycled content. Time is of the essence. So author is saying that time is very important for us. We need to act quickly before things run out, and the new economic practices must be accepted quickly. The only way this can be done is to spread accurate information quickly and on a regular basis. For example, again he's coming out with an example for the theory. Information on climatic changes and of how the inefficient use of water can lead to food shortages must be shared. Media coverage of environmental trends and events must also be stepped up. Can the global economy be restructured in time before environmental deterioration in turn leads to economic decline? That means the author is very clearly saying that environmental deterioration needs to be stopped, and it needs to be stopped because if it is not done, it might lead to economic decline. Right? Remember this particular question mark is very important. That means the tone of the author at the end of the RC becomes a little rhetoric. When I say rhetoric does not mean it's a proper question. It means that the author has left the RC by making you think and keeping his viewpoint very clear. Okay, so let's go to the questions. Before we move to the questions, let's understand a few things. That the author is towards the environmental revolution, and there have been two interesting contrasts that he has brought about over here, one over here and one over here, and people can now make decisions. So this particular paragraph is introducing. These two particular paragraphs are contrasting on one aspect, again contrasting on one aspect, and this is of conclusion. Alright. So why do you think the author compared the environmental revolution to the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution? This is a question which takes us back to the first paragraph. Remember, the author says that the environmental revolution can be compared to the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, and I told you that environmental revolution in the eyes of the author is very important. Why? Because it says it is to transform the existing economy or that can threaten or destroy the environment. So let's go to the options. These revolutions took place a long time ago. I have not been told of that. These revolutions took place over many years. Again, very clearly I can cut down in this option. Bloodshed had not been discussed, so the only option that I am left with is option number A. I'll read this. These revolutions had a great impact on the lives of people. Makes sense because I am keeping this environmental revolution in a very positive tone, right? Alright. Question number 2 says, why could not people in the past stop the destruction of the environment? Remember, they were ignorant, simple, peaceful people. Could be because it says that people did not know what was happening, but at the same time I will rather not say they were simple or peaceful. They did not realize that their actions were slowly destroying the environment. This is another way of saying that they were ignorant. So I will hold on to this option. They did not know people in the governments. This is the first option I would eliminate. Their governments did not believe that the environment was being destroyed. This is contrast. Remember, the paragraph says that they could not persuade their governments. It was not that the governments did not know. Okay, so the governments might have known, but they were reluctant to act and people were not able to persuade them. Right? So there is a very, very thin difference between the way option D has been framed. I am very sure a lot of students would actually be enticed to take this option. So between option A and B, I would rather not infer this, and the best choice between A and B becomes my option number B. The people of today have become more aware of the relationship between the weather, environment and global economies because of, was very, very clearly written, mass media expose. It's a very, very easy question. I would straight away go and jump to this answer. This is just one example. If fisheries was written, I should have written other words like water shortages, rainforest and all that stuff. So writing just one part of the option will not make my answer. So this will not be my answer. The efforts of governments, the governments are not being any effort. This is completely and outrightly rejected option. The only option that I am left with is option number C. Who is paying more attention to preserving the environment today? Right? If we go back to the question, environmental activist this particular option is very, very confusing, right? So remember that the question asks you about today. Environmental activists have been cited for, remember we wrote that there was a clear contrast in the paragraph that was listed in the past. That means the question asks me for today and I am talking about past. Cut down on options. There has been nothing written about strong individuals. Public corporation, I'll hold on to this option. I have never ever discussed this economist part. So the best option for me is option number C. Remember, I did not go for the correct answer. I went for the best answer. Be very, very clearly in understanding that I am actually understanding the options over here. I'm cutting down the options. I am not at all going for the correct answer. How can business decisions affect economies and consequently the environment? If a country buys paper from only one company, the other paper producing companies will have no market and so the revenue will decrease. Is this option has anything to do with environment? Suppose if a country buys paper from only one company, the other paper producing companies will have no market. I'm not talking about revenue straight away. My option should at all times be related to environment somewhere. So I will cut down on this option. If countries decide to buy paper with a high recycled content, then paper producing countries must heed to this demand, otherwise there will be no demand for their products. Okay, so what happens is if there will be no demands for their products and the countries are actually buying paper with a high recycled content, so the companies will be forced to have a high recycled content. If the companies are forced to produce paper with a high recycled content, would my environment be saved? Pretty much yes. Yes, so it's actually affecting the environment, so I'll probably keep this option for some time. Paper producing companies must plant more trees to meet the demand for paper, otherwise they may not have any more trees to produce paper. Nothing to talk about business decisions over here, it's talking about the country's decision. Companies wishing to buy paper often scrutinize the type of paper because they only want to buy paper with a high recycled content. Could be one of the options, but if you see A, B and D, this is the decision that is clearly saying, and my question asked me about the business decision. So between option number B and D, my better answer is option number B. I would rather have left this question in the examination hall because this question is actually asking me an option to be chosen, which is a really little extension of what we have learned. So in the first reading, or probably the first attempt of this RC, I would rather have left this comprehension. What is the writer trying to convey in the expression? Time is of the essence. It is important, we must not delay. The author is saying that we seriously need to act before it gets too late. That means option number C becomes a better answer. The writer emphasizes two elements in the last paragraph, time and. So we'll go to the last paragraph. It says time in the new economic practices must be adopted quickly. The only way this can be done is to spread accurate information quickly, right? So let's go to the question. Is to sharing the information. Straight away I would go and take this answer. Alright, because this question clearly asked me and there was an answer which was clearly listed. So let's go and discuss this. RC1s. Question number 1 should have been attempted. Question number 2, I would have been very confused between option number A and option number B. Even T was confusing. In the first reading I probably could have left this question. Question number 3 was an easy one. Question number 4 was an easy one. 5th, I would have definitely left this question and I would not have regretted it. Question number 6 was easy. Question number 7 was also easy. So out of 7 questions, if you're getting 4 to 5, that's a very good score. 3 is average. Anything below 3 should need some kind of attention from your side. For your sake, I've given the answers for you. I hope this class was successful for you and you understand